hello and welcome aboard. Nicole and I are so grateful and so happy that you have taken this journey with us into highly effective teaching in a blended learning environment. And when we think about blended learning environments, we're saying that the connection between online instruction and in-person instruction and how to navigate through both of those modes of instruction and delivery. But really, it's all about highly effective teaching in any learning environment. We're going to look through and just give an overview real quickly of this course and how we go about our business. So this is what's known as a post. Our course post here is going to determine or really outline the purpose, the expected outcome, the strategies, and the time. This is a very vague one because this is overarching for our entire course. You'll get some work with the specifics behind a good lesson and lesson component post and get some practice with that process as well. But here for this course, we're going to explore all the elements of highly effective teaching that are useful in any learning environment. The outcome of this course is that you will begin to use Mosaic instructional planning, and that will be free to you for a 6-month period of time from the time you get started, and we can of course always work to with you with that, help you along. And why would I even say that? What is my thinking? 3 minutes and 22. Let's go back to the beginning. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Well, welcome aboard, everyone. Nicole and I are thrilled that you have decided to take this journey into highly effective teaching with us. We are going to use this time now to give an overview of the 5 E's of effective planning and delivery of instruction that create effective learning environments in any condition. So looking ahead to our course, our entire course post, this is a strategy that we'll get into in more detail later on in the course sessions, but you're going to see that we use a course post for each of our sessions, and that is planning decisions that filter through the acronym to show purpose, outcome, strategy, and time. The purpose of this course is to explore the elements of highly effective teaching under any learning conditions. The expected outcome is that you will use Mosaic instructional planning to begin building an ongoing exemplar lesson. So you will always have the concepts, the strategies, the ideas that we're going to begin to develop, and maybe in your practice further develop some that you've already have and started. But you'll always have a handmade exemplar for you to go back to remember and to use as a guide to all of your future planning. The strategy for this course, of course, is self-guided. As you know, these are all asynchronous experiences, but I don't want you to feel like you're alone. You have access to us and the instructors through this portal, so please feel free to send an email, connect with us if you have any questions, and we will be sure to help you out along the way. The time is on you, and the amount of time you take with each session. Maybe you want to chunk this whole thing out. Maybe you want to go through it once and then back around to really develop individual parts of your practice, and that's on you. When I say develop parts of the practice, we're talking about creating the least restrictive environments that increase or really result in the most rigorous and engaging experiences. So how do we know what that even looks like? Well, if you're a note taker, you want to connect with these few items that we're going to look at. We're going to define content rigor or rigor as the content depth or complexity. The complexity of thought required for students to both grasp and understand the concept, and most especially how to use the content depth to answer assessment questions. Engagement we define as the product of motivation and active learning. Collaborative structures. Differentiation. How do we provide equity and access to rigorous content for all students? Ways to tailor instruction. Not necessarily individualize instruction, but tailor our instruction to consider whole group, small group, and individual choices that provide greater access to rigorous content for students. Combining these thoughts together allows us to define rigorous and engaging lessons as ones that require learners to internalize their own meaning, to synthesize multiple pathways which help create a personal process, and then to apply all their new understandings in new and varied ways. These are going to really cover the first 3 of the 5 E's. So when we get into entry, exploration, and examples for learning, those chapters are the ones that are really meant to fully develop the idea of rigorous and engaging instruction. Internalizing meaning through content entry. Whenever you see CCQ in our work, it represents critical content questions. So our critical content question regarding entry is, how can I ensure that all of my students have an opportunity to make and internalize their own meanings each day? And so we work through statements of instructional purpose, vocabulary, and then lesson starters. And what we're going to work with is multiple entry point lesson starters for this course. Those 3 ways are the best tried and true ways to allow students to make and internalize their own meanings. From there, the question is, can I front load an experience enough? Can I give enough purpose, motivation, and meaning so that my students can then collaborate in an exploration of content? Now, the question here is, what processes or activities will my students have to engage with to help them to create a personal process? Don't forget that that is our rigorous definition. So we want the multiple representations, multiple opinions, multiple ways in which students can see solution pathways and so on, that will allow for them to develop a personalized process. So they have content meaning, they have a process, and then they can apply. And we'll see that in a second. I first want to go through why. Why do we have students collaborate together? What are the 4 instructional purposes? Well, here they are around the ring of this, what we call the strategy taxonomy wheel. The 4 purposes behind collaborative work with students is for them to exchange ideas. And what you'll notice here is then there's 3 icons. There's the triangle, the square, and the circle. When we get to our content exploration session and chapter, you'll look at a lot of collaborative strategies that move from teacher-directed and more teacher-centered experiences, even though they are collaborative in small group, but the teacher is taking care of all of the aspects of the group setup, and moving each idea down to, or really honing more closely in on, more student-assisted strategies. That's your light blue middle ring. Ultimately, we want to create environments where student-directed learning takes place, even in small groups. And that's what that bullseye is all about. So we'll go through and talk about the 6 different strategies that are in each of these instructional purposes. But for now, we're just going to continue a brief overview. So exchanging ideas is why I might have students collaborate together, or maybe modeling a process to each other, getting a model of a process from a peer, modeling a process to a teacher, different ways to go about that, and then solving a problem, something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own, but as a result of working together, they're able to really give input. And even if they could do a problem and solve it on their own, and problems here are not only related to mathematics and or science. When we say solve a problem, oftentimes teachers will confuse that with the idea that it's a problem solving. Okay, but there are plenty of reasons and ways in which other humanities courses can go about solving a problem or coming to a conclusion using multiple opinions or perspectives. Also, we want students to reflect and revise on their work. reflection is a critical piece of the learning process, and the lifelong learning process of reflecting and revising is also something that is modeled through collaborative work. So these are the 4 ways and the 3 different levels to get students to collaborate together. We, again, will dive deeper into each strategy, and you'll get some resources that allow you to really see the rationales and the descriptions, and even some recommendations for use when we get through into the exploration section. So we've entered students into the content, helped them to create and internalize their own meaning. From there, we take that initial stages of understanding and meaning development, bring multiple perspectives together to allow students an opportunity to create their own personal process. And now we have to see if their level of understanding and their personal process can result in some tasks for feedback and evaluation. So when we talk about examples for learning, I want you to notice I starred this because this is the place where we as teachers, under time constraints, have to be very, very careful and very really stubborn, if you will, in times where we can give students enough opportunity to work formatively independently. Let me say that again. Work formatively independently. In other words, they get to produce some work products that then they will be able to evaluate themselves or even a peer against some established criteria and be able to then get feedback and time of revision before they have summative evaluation. All right, so look at the critical content questions here. What practice tasks will provide the best opportunity for students to evaluate their own personal process and their understanding of new content? And then what criteria will they use to self-evaluate? So the components of highly effective examples would be that students can apply knowledge using respectful tasks. So we talk about lesson alignment, and in the entry we'll get into also talking about aligning objectives to standards and things like that. So which tasks are they going to have to really use that will be a good representation of their understanding, but also will represent to the students a good way of seeing how they're being assessed. All right, it is disrespectful to not expose students to the ways, in all of the ways in which they will have to use the content, including standardized assessments. So we want then for them to be able to compare their own work against an exemplary process or an established criteria, and this will be rubrics or other means like an exemplar student response or an exemplary teacher response, and so on. And then last, students will get to examine similarities and differences and either validate their responses or have a moment to revise their responses. And along the way, collect what and how questions to be asked of their teacher. So if this was asynchronous learning or online learning in this case, or even live and in person, there's a lot of times where students are isolated. They're not sure of if they're correct or not. They need an outlet for that. They need to know if what they're doing is effective and actually coming to the proper conclusions. And if not, what kinds of questions they can bring to the table. Consider a flipped classroom where some of the learning and some of the understanding is meant to happen prior to class, and then they bring in examples and questions and create their own ways and really further their own ways of understanding something. So that's the idea behind examples for learning. Real quick recap, we want to enter kids into the content conversation to create and have them internalize meaning of the content lesson and the processes and all the different factors, including academic vocabulary, different ways to visualize that, different entry points to get into the conversation, and then of course our job as teachers doing a good introduction and or statement of purpose, giving them purpose and motivation. We move them then into a collaborative setting where students can work with multiple perspectives to start creating their own personal process, not just model the teachers or how, in a kind of a show and tell moment where they're just kind of mimicking a teacher. They're now practicing and hearing from peers to how they are establishing their own process to really personalize the experience. And then from there, seeing under low stakes environment, a feedback formative environment, how they can use example tasks to change and revise their thinking, or really validate and justify their thinking. And that is very empowering as well. So there's really both opportunities there as well. The next piece of the puzzle is to elaborate, extend, solidify thinking. So how will students justify, validate, and extend their thinking? Some best practice options that we're going to use will be Flipgrid, where we can make video journals. We can do that in writing on a Padlet, and you'll see Padlet during our exploration. Or they can even make presentations like we're going to do with Prezi for our entry. Okay, so we're going to combine and/or just focus on one tool for elaboration of content. In the blended online environment, you can host discussion forums. You can do this live or virtually, or you can do video conferencing. And guys, we can do this in person as well. Students can come to the end of a lesson, can have a moment in front of a computer, almost like think Survivor, think other reality shows where they have either a confession booth or a reflection booth. And students can have that. You can set that up in your classroom with iPads or Chromebooks or whatever access you have to some technology, or it could be a big part of a homework assignment. Put down and have students journal, solidify their thinking, extend their thinking, get some feedback if necessary, clear up some misconceptions if necessary, but most of the time, just enjoy the process and speak about the ways in which they collaborated and learned. These are really empowering and effective tools. The last piece then is more formal evaluation. So what work tasks will my students perform to provide evidence of learning or mastery? Pay attention to your standards. Look up and do a Google search if you need to determine in your content area which of your standards are declarative standards and which are procedural. There should be information out in your state to align you with those thoughts. Declarative standards, more of your level 1 and 2, recall, remembering, a lot of factual work, a lot of skill and process, not very multi-skilled or multi-stepped skills, but maybe 1 or 2 step skills. Procedural, now we're talking about the ways in which we do something, and that's going to get into more of your analysis, evaluation, creation mode, maybe ways to identify similarities and differences, or do like an error analysis, different high complexity functions that we have to attend to. So once you realize what the standard is meant to cover in terms of whether it's declarative or procedural, you'll be able to better align an assessment, an evidence of learning assessment to your lesson. The second bullet says that the evaluation of student effort must be included. As much as you can, you want to try to include effort and ways of showing process and proving that they collaborated, and simple survey questions. What did you offer your group during the collaborative time? What suggestion did you accept or take from a group member? And so on. And then the third bullet, talks about evaluation of the planning and delivery process. So an evaluation of learning is giving evidence of student success, but it's also giving evidence of teacher success. Now, this is a two-way street, and I'm not here to say that if a student doesn't get it, that I'm not recognizing all the learning gaps that are in place and all the things that came before our, what we inherited in our students. And sometimes I know that small, tiny steps of growth are really huge steps of growth. So I really account for all that, but do a very healthy check of yourself from time to time. Look at the students who have been grasping the concepts, and take a minute to ask, how was this? How did this lesson go? Were you affected by it? What strategies did I use that you really enjoyed and were able to learn most from? You keep a handful of kids that you can get some real honest reflection from, and it'll really change your practice. All right, well, this is now to the your turn section. We're going to get into our lesson entry, and that's going to be the next chapter. And in lesson entry, the starting place there is writing strong lesson objectives. Very, very important piece of the rigor puzzle, and very important piece of coherent design and lesson alignment. So hopefully you are ready to roll. You have a good overview of what's to come, and you're excited about getting in and getting started. I will be seeing your work products as you produce them and as you navigate through the course. And I'll also be able to check in on Mosaic and see the progress of your lesson, your exemplary lesson. Be diligent with this work, and please feel free to reach out and email us at any time with any extra questions. Thanks again for being with us, and happy planning.